So videocards.com has just posted a very confident headline that the RTX 4070 is going to retail at $599. Now, this is tagged as a rumor. This is a leak. There's still no official information from NVIDIA. However, this contradicts the earlier rumor we had seen reported that the price would be at $750, which honestly just sounded insanely too high since the RTX 4070 Ti is actually available at $800. That just did not seem to be enough price segmentation. So while I reported on that leak, I said that I did not think that sounded like a very reasonable price, and that obviously if it came out at that price, there'd be no reason to consider buying the card. So this price of $599 in that context certainly sounds a lot better. Now, people at the time were even posting in the comment section, are we just seeing a high price rumored floating around so that when they then come in at $600, it sounds a lot more reasonable? And I mean, sure, maybe. I wouldn't put past any company to do all sorts of mind games. But at the same time, it's just, it is what it is. We've got this $599 price point. Now, where is this information coming from? So if we take a look at the videocards.com article this is coming from, they're basically saying they confirmed this price with 3 sources. They're saying the company has reportedly settled on RTX 4070 non-Ti SKU price at $599. This information was confirmed during a press briefing, which usually takes place before each launch. Reviewers are now expecting their 4070 test units to arrive early next week. And again, they say although we confirmed this price with 3 sources, just be aware that NVIDIA is known for last-minute changes in regard to pricing. So while videocards.com many times reports on leaks and rumors that have been posted elsewhere on other websites, on Twitter, things like that, this one does seem to be them saying it's their own sources and not just a single source, but multiple sources from an actual NVIDIA press briefing that takes place before launch, and also suggests that test units will be getting to reviewers early next week, which would line up very well with the rumored release date for the card of April 13th. Now, what do I think this means? Like, is this a good deal now? What are we expecting in terms of performance? So let's do a little price to performance analysis of this, and then let's also look into, so what do I think that means regarding what would a 4060 Ti cost, a 4060, all of that? Because, they'll all have to be priced in accordance with each other in some sort of, at least if there's any sanity to the pricing, which is not always the case. So, okay, if the RTX 4070 costs $599, the first thing I think we should mention is that makes it the direct pricing successor to the 3070 Ti, not to the 3070. The 3070 came in with a $500 MSRP, and the 3070 Ti was heavily criticized for coming in at $600 and offering very little extra performance compared to the baseline 3070 for that $100 price increase. So this is much more like what I expected to happen when the 3070 Ti and the 3080 Ti, for that matter, came out. With the previous generation, I suggested that I think that NVIDIA was mostly just trying to set a new baseline for the MSRPs moving forward. And sure enough, the 3080 Ti cost $1,200, and that's where NVIDIA priced the RTX 4080 non-Ti. And the 3070 Ti came in at $600, and this is now the price that, again, still rumored, that we're seeing the RTX 4070 non-Ti. So there's a lot going on there, but is it a good deal? Okay, well, what do we expect in terms of performance? Well, if you take these rumored specs, now let's be clear, these are rumored specs, but if you take these as correct, you can then take the CUDA cores, the clock speeds, all of that, and you can compute its raw compute potential, which I've actually shown in recently, I think in yesterday's news video, that WCCF Tech has already put together a compute power relative performance chart for a whole bunch of GPUs here, starting with the 4090 on top. And then they've taken the RTX 4070's theoretical compute based on these rumored specs, and it puts it slightly ahead of an RTX 3080. Now, interestingly enough, the 4070, again, being slightly ahead of the RTX 3080, and coming in with a rumored 12 gigabytes of VRAM, which is 2 more than the 3080 had, although there was a 3080 12 gigabyte. What this is actually making me feel like is that this is going to basically be, performance-wise, very, very similar to an RTX 3080 12GB. I think that would not be an unreasonable expectation to have, although to be clear, the compute performance doesn't always perfectly line up to gaming performance, and also the these are still rumored specs, but at this point before launch, usually the rumored specs do end up being fairly accurate. Now, so what does that mean in terms of value? Well, if you take an RTX 3070 as a baseline and look at about how much more powerful an RTX 3080 was, if we're taking that as roughly the performance we're expecting on the 4070, then that's about a 30% performance jump, depending on the game and the review and the context and whatever, but these are all rumored ballpark figures anyway. So if we take that rumored ballpark figure and we pop into a calculator, if we do the price of the 4070, rumored at $600, divided by the price of the 3070, which was supposed to be $500 MSRP, we see that it costs 20% more. But based on this this performance number, again, if it lines up to about 3080 levels of performance, we will be getting more than a 20% performance improvement. Meaning that it's going to be offering a small improvement on performance per dollar compared to the MSRP of the RTX 3070. Now, another way of looking at this, which actually makes the card look a little bit better, although I'm not sure if this is the fair way of looking at it, it's probably at least the way maybe NVIDIA would prefer that you look at it. If you look at this based on the RTX 3070 Ti as the baseline, this is actually its price predecessor, right? Remember the 4070 is coming out at the same price as the 3070 Ti. Again, if this rumor does end up being true. Now, if we look at the 3070 Ti as the baseline, and then assume roughly RTX 3080 levels of performance, we're now seeing about a 20%, maybe a little bit more, performance improvement at the same price. So either way we look at it, if the rumored performance and price ends up actually lining up with reality, we will at least be seeing some improvement on performance per dollar compared to the previous generation, which is good to see. I would have loved to have seen more, but generally what I'm looking for is the most exciting thing about a new generation of graphics cards is that you get better performance per dollar. Either at the same price you get more performance, or you get more performance, or you how should I put it? Right, it's the same price, more performance, or if you pay more, you at least get more performance per dollar, right? That's what we're looking for with the new generation. Now, another thing I should mention is that the RTX 3070 has been very difficult to actually get at its $500 MSRP ever since its launch. If I want to buy one right now, the cheapest one I can find searching PC Part Picker, which searches new listings at major retailers. Yes, I'm aware that used listings would be cheaper, but it's not fair to compare to used prices. There's still the cheapest one's about $550. Now, they have popped up at $500 MSRP occasionally, but it has been very rare. And for that matter, the RTX 3070 Ti, which is the direct MSRP predecessor, actually usually still costs more like $640 to $700 and go up from there on the new market as well. Although you could get them, like I did end up buying a Founders Edition one at Best Buy when they still had them in stock at its MSRP of $600. So that was a real MSRP that you could get from time to time. It was just difficult, even after the crypto craze had died down a little bit. So overall, I've got to say that if this comes out true, I think that I'm at least somewhat happy to see a improvement in performance per dollar compared to the last generation. Because if you look at some of the previous products, the 4070 Ti offered an extremely small improvement on performance per dollar over the last generation. This is also not huge, but I think slightly better. I think this is better performance per dollar than the 4070 Ti. And the 4070 Ti, as much as its price was criticized, actually does offer better performance per dollar than the 4080 or even the 4090 by a little bit. So it actually was the best performance per dollar so far of the generation. So it does look like, if this turns out to be true, that NVIDIA is offering slightly better performance per dollar as you go down the product stack Again, if the rumored performance and price does, I need to keep saying that, right? But this is not the official review or launch or anything. Now let's go quickly into what I think this means for other GPUs. For example, we have some rumored specifications and release dates for the RTX 4060 Ti. With theoretical performance in between the 3070 and 3070 Ti, but much closer to the 3070 Ti, if the rumored specs end up actually being correct. I reported on this in my last video, so I don't want to dwell on it too much, but now we have maybe a better idea what it could be priced at. So this chart from videocards.com does have a typo where the 4070 should be listed as expected in April. The rumored release date is April 13th. The 4060 Ti, we just saw rumors expecting it to be coming out in May, and then some more rumors pointing to the RTX 4050 in June. Now, we don't have enough information to go off of for performance on the 4050 at this point, other than a rumored 6 gigabytes of VRAM. 4060 Ti rumored at 8 gigabytes of VRAM, and coming out in May with, again, theoretical performance right about here. Now, but what do I think it'll cost? Well, I think if it ends up being true that the 4070 costs $600, then I think what they're probably going to be shooting for with the 4060 Ti would be $500. The 3060 Ti had a $400 MSRP, and at that price actually had I think the best price to performance, along with the 3080 at its MSRP, of the whole 3000 series. So I would be shocked to see the 4060 Ti come out at that $400 price point. I would be expecting $500, at which case it's going to be slightly better than the 3070 at the same MSRP price point. So again, a small improvement if that ends up being what we see. Now, then the 4060 non-Ti, what would we expect there? Well, if the 4060 Ti comes in at $500, I think that leaves room for the 4060 non-Ti at $400, which again is a step up from the MSRP of the 3060. And then where does that put the 4050? Is that going to be a $300 graphics card? That does line up closer to what the 3050 was actually selling for, despite its MSRPs. Anyway, we'll have to see where all of this goes. Now, again, it's nice to see, 12 gigabytes of VRAM. I'm sure some people would like even more. We've seen several new game releases like Resident Evil 4, Hogwarts Legacy, and The Last of Us Part 1 that are very memory VRAM heavy at the highest settings. Now, granted, you can just turn down settings to get that a bit under control. But 4070, if it really does come in at $600, offering 3080 12 gigabyte type performance, big step up in VRAM from its predecessor. I'm not blown away, but I at least think it's probably the best. I think it will be a pretty popular card. I think it's offering better performance per dollar if this all ends up being true than the rest of the product stack this generation. What do you guys think in the comment section? Of course, I would have loved to have seen this come out at the $500 MSRP and be even stronger. I would love to see more, but I'm at least expecting an improvement in, looks like it'll be more power efficient than the 3070 and 3070 Ti. Cost about the same as the 3070 Ti. Perform a lot better, more VRAM, has newer features like frame generation and all that. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section. And by the way, also just real quick on the topic of I mentioned The Last of Us Part 1. So in that, when I tested it out, I did test my 6700 XT, and I felt like the performance seemed a bit weird. Not quite what I was expecting, especially like the 1080p Ultra results performing pretty similar to my 1440p Ultra results. Well, I tested it on the latest drivers as of the time the game launched that morning, but AMD has released shortly after the game's launch an optimized driver specifically for The Last of Us Part 1, and I did not have that when the game launched, so perhaps we'd see better performance on those GPUs. Just want to throw that out here. If you watched that video, I'll probably pin something in a comment on that video as well. I hope all of you have an excellent day.